This is a 2023 drama series, Revenge Through Time Travel. The story begins with the female lead, Yi-ju, an orphan. As a child, Yi-ju desperately tried to appear obedient in hopes of being adopted and having parents. When the wife of the chairman came to select a child, Yi-ju saw that she was feeling hot and immediately poured her a glass of water. This act successfully pleased the chairman's wife, and Yi-ju was adopted. For an abandoned child, the only weapon is to act obedient. Yi-ju worked hard to please her adoptive parents. When she saw a delicious strawberry cake, she resisted the urge to appear greedy. She never asked for new clothes and always acted well-behaved and sensible. Her adoptive mother noticed all of this, but in reality, her adoptive mother despised her. She adopted Yi-ju purely for entertainment. As an adult, Yi-ju met someone she liked. She mustered the courage to confess, and he accepted her. She thought she had finally found happiness. However, after marriage, her mother-in-law only saw her as an ATM. Whenever her mother-in-law called, Yi-ju had to prepare a grand meal to entertain her friends. Pressed for time, Yi-ju asked her sister-in-law for help, but she dismissed her, saying to just make something simple. With no other choice, Yi-ju hurriedly cleaned the house and started preparing various dishes. In her rush, she accidentally cut her finger. Her mother-in-law showed no concern and instead scolded her for not ordering takeout. Yi-ju explained that guests deserved a carefully prepared meal, which only angered her mother-in-law more. Her mother-in-law accused Yi-ju of embarrassing her on purpose. Yi-ju handed her a credit card as an apology. Seeing that she got what she wanted, her mother-in-law pretended to be reluctant but accepted it. Yi-ju painted a family portrait as a gift for her adoptive mother. However, when she returned home, no one was there. She called, but no one answered, so she contacted the secretary. Only then did she learn that today was her sister's gallery opening. No one in the family had told her. Even worse, her husband was at the event, gently filming Yura with a warm smile. Yi-ju brought the family portrait to the venue. Instead of being happy, her adoptive mother mocked her for overestimating herself. Yi-ju had a talent for painting since childhood. Her adoptive mother exploited her innocence, making her replicate famous artworks. However, a buyer eventually noticed the deception. At an auction, the same buyer deliberately purchased a painting at the highest price and publicly exposed the fraud. Yi-ju's adoptive mother insisted the painting was genuine, claiming no one could replicate the artist's style. But the buyer pointed at Zhonghye and said, "Isn't your daughter the one who has been forging these paintings?" Her adoptive mother tried to deny it, but the buyer immediately called the police to investigate all the artworks she had sold. Realizing she was in serious trouble, her adoptive mother anxiously asked her secretary what to do. The secretary glanced at Yi-ju before whispering something to her. Then, her adoptive mother suddenly begged Yi-ju for help. She asked Yi-ju to take the blame, saying the paintings were all her work. Before Yi-ju could respond, the secretary told the buyer that Yi-ju had forged the paintings and split the profits. She even claimed that the last painting sold was also Yi-ju's work. Yi-ju was completely stunned. She couldn't understand why her own mother would do this to her. The secretary then presented various pieces of evidence. The forged paintings were all found in the gallery's studio, where Yi-ju often painted. Records also showed transfers from Yi-ju's account to a shell company. After hearing this, Yi-ju finally realized that her mother had been using her all along. The police immediately moved to arrest her. Her adoptive mother pretended to cry, saying, "It's my fault for not raising her properly. Please take me instead." But the most heartbreaking thing was that her husband, rather than helping her, ran to comfort Yura instead. The art gallery belonged to Yura, and Jae-ho didn't want to see her upset. Feeling distressed for her, he openly confessed his feelings. Yura, however, had always known that Jae-ho liked her, but she only wanted to marry a wealthy man. To her, someone from Jae-ho's modest background was beneath her. Their entire conversation was overheard by Yi-ju. When Yura noticed her, she awkwardly ran away, and Jae-ho instinctively wanted to chase after her. Yi-ju couldn't believe what she had just heard. She confronted Jae-ho, but he simply told her, "I was planning to tell you today." Yi-ju interrupted him, asking, "Weren't you going to talk to me about resigning today?" She pulled out his resignation letter, but Jae-ho told her to turn to the next page. Yi-ju was stunned. It was a divorce agreement. "Did you marry me just so you could stay close to Yura?" she asked. Jae-ho admitted, "I married you because I felt sorry for you." Yi-ju was completely shattered. At that moment, the police arrived. Heartbroken, Yi-ju ran away, driving while sobbing uncontrollably. Her adoptive mother called, desperately pleading with her. "Now is the time for you to repay me," she said. "I'll hire the best lawyer. If you return the money and show remorse, you won't even be sentenced." Yi-ju listened to her mother's begging, but, overwhelmed by pain and betrayal, crashed into another car. As she lost consciousness, a truck collided with her vehicle again. Yi-ju was rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment, but her injuries were too severe for surgery. The doctors decided to monitor her condition first. After they left, only her adoptive mother remained in the room. Taking advantage of Yiju's unconscious state, she quietly removed her oxygen tube, whispering, "In your next life, don't be so kind." She then recounted the past, admitting that she had always hated Yiju and had only adopted her for amusement. After finishing her confession, she ordered the secretary to reconnect the oxygen tube. A call from her adoptive father came through, and whatever she said caused Yiju to completely lose hope. She closed her eyes in despair. As the doctors rushed in to resuscitate her, Yiju silently prayed, "If I get another chance, I will take revenge on everyone." Ultimately, she did not survive, but in the next moment, she was startled awake by the sound of an alarm. She had been reborn, back to the day of her wedding dress fitting 1 year ago. She anxiously touched the wedding dress, and the sales assistant complimented her, just like before. Everything that followed played out exactly as it had in her past life. That's when Yiju finally realized this was real, not a dream. She recalled her adoptive mother's last words, "In your next life, don't be so kind." This time, Yiju decided to follow her advice, and her first act after rebirth was to break off her engagement. She took off the wedding dress and tossed the bouquet onto her fiancé's head. Jae-ho was completely stunned. He tried to stop Yiju, assuming she was just throwing a tantrum, but Yiju had no patience for him. She needed to inform everyone about the cancellation. Next, she told her adoptive mother about her decision. Her mother ignored her and instead instructed the housekeeper to buy a chicken for soup. Yiju, growing impatient, asked, "Did you not hear me? Or are you just pretending not to?" Her mother was taken aback. Was this really the same timid girl? Jae-ho soon arrived, begging her mother to delay the engagement. But Yiju, now out of her wedding dress, "How many times do I have to say it before you understand?" Her adoptive mother, irritated, scolded them for arguing in front of her. Jae-ho quickly pulled Yiju aside, only for her to shake off his hand in disgust. She exposed the truth. Jae-ho had only married her to be close to Yura. Caught off guard by her directness, Do-guk panicked. He admitted that his family had gone bankrupt and that marrying Yiju was the only way he could survive. He couldn't afford to let the engagement be broken. Truly despicable. No matter how much he begged, Yiju remained unmoved. Jae-ho was confused. "Didn't you always like me?" But Yiju suddenly recalled his final words to her in her previous life. Yiju coldly told Jae-ho, "That wasn't love. It was pity. You tried so hard to be liked, just like I once did. I saw myself in you, and that made me sympathize with you. But now, I won't do that anymore. I won't humble myself for anyone." With that, she walked away confidently. On her way back, Yiju overheard a conversation between her adoptive mother and Yura. It turned out Yura had always been in love with Do-guk and was desperate to marry him. After hearing this, Yiju made a bold decision. She would take Do-guk for herself. She immediately called her best friend to gather information about him. When her friend realized that Yiju had completely changed and was out for revenge, she provided detailed information about Do-guk's family background. Yiju found out that Yura and Do-guk had a date the next day. The following day, Yiju arrived there politely and unexpectedly discovered that Do-guk already knew who she was. Without hesitation, she got straight to the point. "How about we get married?" Do-guk was amused. "I heard you were a boring woman, but you're actually quite interesting." He then added, "If I'm getting married, of course I'll choose the better option." With that, he pulled out a hotel keycard, testing Yiju's reaction. At first, Yiju hesitated, but when she saw Yura approaching, she grabbed the keycard without a second thought. Do-guk immediately led Yiju away, leaving Yura standing there in shock. However, as Yiju entered the hotel, she realized she had misunderstood. This was just Do-guk's office. Meanwhile, Yura, feeling anxious, called Jae-ho, asking him to take Yiju away. But Yiju ignored everyone. Desperate, Yura sent her a message. "I'll wait for you here until you come out." Yiju read it and decided to spend the night at the hotel. As Do-guk slowly closed the distance between them, they engaged in a tense exchange, testing each other's motives. Finally, Yiju made her offer. "Let's have a contract marriage. I'll help your company go public." To prove her worth, she used her knowledge from her past life to reveal crucial business information. Intrigued, Do-guk became even more curious about her. They shared a drink. Meanwhile, Yura, unable to wait any longer, lashed out at Jae-ho before leaving in frustration. As Yiju drank more, she started confessing her pain. "I've already died once," she murmured. Do-guk didn't know what she had been through, but he felt an overwhelming urge to protect this wounded girl. From his reaction, it seemed like he had known Yiju for a long time. The next morning, Yiju woke up in a panic and hurriedly fled. When she got home, her adoptive mother slapped her across the face. Her adoptive father then demanded that she marry Jae-ho as originally planned. Yiju refused, explaining that Jae-ho didn't love her. Yura immediately played the victim, claiming that Yiju was only making up lies because she was upset that her brother-in-law didn't help her pick a wedding dress. Yiju was speechless. Yura was truly a master of manipulation. Without hesitation, Yiju dropped a bombshell. "I already slept with Doguk." That statement sent Yura into a complete breakdown. Her adoptive mother, furious, hugged Yura protectively and ordered the secretary to lock Yiju in her room until she reflected on her actions. Yiju was used to this kind of punishment. Every time Yura played the victim, she was the one who suffered. But she wasn't going to sit back and endure it anymore. She immediately checked the news on her phone, expecting to find reports about her and Doguk's date, but there was nothing. It turned out that the Taizi group had suppressed the news. Since her original plan had failed, she needed to think of a new strategy. Just as she was discussing her next move with her friend over the phone, the secretary barged in, confiscating her phone and bringing her some medicine. Yiju pretended to take it, but secretly spit it out after the secretary left. Meanwhile, Doguk was being interrogated by his entire family. His mother, after seeing the news, was shocked. "You're really going to marry that adopted daughter?" Doguk looked directly at his family and declared, "I've chosen Yiju." Meanwhile, Yiju, still locked up, was desperately trying to find a way out. She spotted a passing student and convinced them to lend her a phone in exchange for 10,000 won. As soon as she got the phone, she called Doguk. "I've been locked up. If you come help me now, I'll officially propose a business deal and give you insider stock information." Daoguo, still with his family, smirked and decided to tease her. "Say it," he demanded. "Say, 'Please save me, my prince.'" Yiju was stunned. She clenched her teeth, but realizing she had no choice, reluctantly gave in. Hearing Yiju's plea, her adoptive mother sneered. "You think spending a single night together means anything to Doguk? Even your own mother abandoned you. What man would ever truly love you?" she mocked. "You should be grateful that Jeho is even willing to marry you, yet you dare to break off the engagement." As she continued her tirade, Doguk finally arrived. Right in front of Yiju's entire family, he declared, "I'm here to ask for Yiju's hand in marriage." Yiju's adoptive mother was furious. "You went on a matchmaking date with Yura, yet now you want to marry Yiju? Isn't that disrespectful?" Doguk remained cold and direct. "I know that you asked the Taizi group matriarch to arrange the matchmaking, but I already rejected Yura in person, and yet she kept contacting me." Yura's face burned with humiliation. Her resentment toward Yiju deepened. Doguk smirked and shut her down. With that, he took Yiju's hand and led her away. Before leaving, Yiju demanded her phone back. Seeing this, Doguk didn't hesitate to take another jab at her adoptive mother. "From now on, I will protect Yiju," he declared. Once they were outside, Yiju tried to discuss her business proposal again, but Doguk simply said, "Let's eat first." He took her to a restaurant, but Yiju found herself unable to eat. Doguk's expression darkened. Without hesitation, he took her away from the restaurant and personally prepared food for her, carefully microwaving her favorite dishes. As Yiju tried again to bring up the proposal, Doguk once again brushed it aside. Overwhelmed by his unexpected kindness, Yiju suddenly broke down in tears. For the first time, she felt what it was like to be cared for. Seeing her cry, Doguk's heart ached. He wanted to understand what she had been through in that house. Through her tears, Yiju finally shared everything, her pain, her reasons for wanting to marry him. "I want revenge on Yura and Zhonghye, her adopted mother," she admitted. Doguk smiled. He stepped aside, picked a small flower and placed it in her hand. "Marry me," he said. Yiju was completely caught off guard. She hadn't prepared for this at all. After a moment of hesitation, Yiju stepped forward and kissed him. The next day, Doguk deliberately leaked news of their relationship. When Yura saw it, she angrily confronted her father. "You should never have allowed Yiju to marry Doguk," her father sighed. "When a man is truly captivated by a woman, no one can stop him." But her mother wasn't convinced. "Doguk's parents haven't approved this marriage yet. This is completely his decision. If we offend the Taizi group because of this, we'll gain nothing from it." Hearing this, Yura's father immediately called Yiju in for questioning. Her mother seized the opportunity to set an impossible condition. "You must have the Taizi group chairman personally propose on behalf of Doguk, and his family must approve this marriage." She was certain Yiju would fail, but Yiju, without hesitation, confidently accepted the challenge. That very night, she went straight to Doguk to discuss the matter. Doguk, already expecting her, sent his secretary to pick her up while he stayed home, cooking. When Yiju arrived, he greeted her with a warm cup of white coffee and a meal he had personally prepared. Yiju was confused. "Why did you leak the news about us?" Doguk smirked. "Because I wanted the benefits you promised, and I was afraid you'd back out." Then, he pulled out a contract, a prenuptial agreement. "Sign it." Yiju glanced at the document and then at the date on her wristwatch. "Let's set the marriage duration for 1 year." Doguk agreed. They both signed the contract. Doguk smiled as he led Yiju into a newly prepared residence. Since we're business partners, we need a base of operations. This place is specially prepared for you, he said. The kitchen was stocked with Yiju's favorite foods. The living room had various entertainment options, and the bedroom was decorated like a princess's chamber. It was clear. Doguk truly adored her. Yiju stared at the time on her wristwatch. If I were to return to that moment again, would I die, or would I be reborn? The thought made her clutch the key Doguk had given her. She resolved to change her fate, starting with Zhonghye's counterfeit paintings. She went straight to Zhonghye's gallery and demanded her stored artwork back. But her battle wasn't just with Zhonghye. She needed to win over Doguk's grandfather for marriage approval. Determined, Yiju waited outside the hospital room, pleading for an audience. No matter how hard she knocked, the old man remained indifferent. Zhonghye, hearing this news, smirked. Perfect, she said. Desperate for a solution, Yiju turned to her best friend. You need to start at the top, her friend advised. Doguk's mother, Yeonhwa, is the real decision-maker. Every week, Yeonhwa attended a pottery class, a social gathering for high-class women. It was a battlefield of gossip and influence. If you want a real challenge, announce yourself there, her friend suggested. Sure enough, when Yiju arrived, the wealthy women were already mocking Doguk. I heard his latest obsession is some orphan girl with no proper background. Hearing this, Yeonhwa's fury erupted. She grabbed a spoon and nearly struck the speaker, causing a chaotic scene. Seizing the moment, Yiju stepped inside. The room fell silent as she confidently introduced herself. After the gathering, Yeonhwa agreed to a private meeting. I'm here for your approval, Yiju said honestly. As she left, she noticed Yeonhwa waiting outside. Come, have tea with me, she invited. Following her into the restaurant, Yiju froze. Yura was there too. The tension in the air was suffocating. Meanwhile, back at the Han family home, Doguk was having dinner with his family, completely unaware of the storm Yiju was walking into. To gain her grandmother's approval for the marriage, Yiju decided to move back home. This made Seong-yoon extremely uneasy. Doguk and Seong-yoon were half-brothers, sharing the same father but different mothers. Doguk's mother was actually Seong-yoon's stepmother. To avoid favoritism, she had allowed Seong-yoon to take over as the head of Taiji Group, while Doguk chose to study abroad. However, Doguk was remarkably talented in business. He not only founded his own company independent of the family, but also led it to become the industry leader in sales. In contrast, Seong-yoon pursued wealth through unethical means, including forced evictions. Their grandmother was deeply disappointed in Seong-yoon and favored Doguk instead. During a family dinner, Seong-yoon mocked Doguk. You can't change your birthright, he sneered. I heard that woman is just an adopted daughter. She must have an interesting personality, never having experienced parental love. Doguk remained silent in front of his grandmother. However, later that night, as he was heading back to his room, he sternly warned Seong-yoon not to test his limits. At the same time, Yura advised Yiju to control her emotions and not show open hostility toward her. But Yiju despised putting on a fake act. When they returned to the dining room, Yura took the initiative to serve tea for Yiju, but Yiju dismissed her with indifference. Yeonhwa, Doguk's mother, noticed their tension and asked, Do you two not get along? Then she made a shocking suggestion. She wanted Yiju to give up Doguk for her younger sister. Yiju refused outright. I will never give up anything to Yura. Besides, this isn't something that can be settled by someone giving up. Doguk's wishes matter too. From now on, I refuse to meet you together with Yura. Yeonhwa was stunned by Yiju's defiance. Do you always talk back like this? Were you never taught manners? Just then, Doguk appeared and coldly responded, The only rude person here is you, mother. He took Yiju's hand, ready to leave. Yiju, feeling slightly guilty for coming uninvited, apologized. But I believe you'll understand how I feel. After all, you also married against your parents' wishes. Hearing this, Yeonhwa launched into a long speech about how exceptional and beautiful she was back in the day, implying that Yiju wasn't worthy of Doguk. Then she suddenly asked, Do you love Doguk? The question caught Yiju off guard. After a moment of thought, she responded truthfully. I broke off my previous engagement because I was being used. But Doguk isn't someone who would betray the woman he loves. Besides, he has a straightforward mother who speaks her mind. This unexpectedly pleased Yeonhwa. After they left, she had already made up her mind. Yura attempted to bribe her with gifts, but she firmly rejected them. Meanwhile, Doguk told Yiju, If you want to get back at Yura, you have to fall in love with me. He then listed several reasons why this was the best course of action. Yiju, surprisingly, was convinced. Doguk then suggested, Why don't we try confessing our feelings? Yiju hesitated and challenged, You first. Without hesitation, Doguk stood up, walked up to Yiju and said, If I say it, will you be able to handle it? Yiju was momentarily speechless. Seeing her reaction, Doguk asked, Did your heart just skip a beat? Yeju quickly brushed it off, thinking he was just acting. But little did she know, Doguk was being completely sincere. That night, Doguk decided to stay over. Yeju, unable to sleep, walked out to find him drinking heavily. He had already fallen asleep on the couch, murmuring in his dreams. Gently, Yeju wiped the sweat from his face. The next morning, Yeonhwa suddenly arrived and was shocked to see them together. When Yeju moved to wake Doguk, she stopped her. He usually has trouble sleeping. Let him rest. Before leaving, she told Yeju, I approve of your marriage. Overjoyed, Yeju rushed to tell her adoptive father the news. Doguk's family would officially come to propose that weekend. Her adoptive father was more than pleased, knowing that an alliance with Taiji Group would greatly benefit his business. Her adoptive mother, however, attempted to object. But at that moment, Yeju received a call from Doguk's grandfather. In a commanding tone, he instructed them to properly prepare for the wedding. It turned out that the day Yeju had begged outside his hospital room, after the secretary left, Yeju recalled a memory from her past life. Right before she died, Doguk's grandfather had called to ask for her forgiveness. However, she had never understood what he sought forgiveness for. Facing the door, she called out, I've already forgiven you, Grandpa. The moment she spoke those words, the door opened. The grandfather, emotional, asked Yeju to repeat what she had just said. When she did, he became visibly moved. By the weekend, the families gathered for the formal marriage proposal at a remote location. During the meeting, Jung-hye deliberately mocked the setting, calling it inappropriate for such an important occasion. Yeonhwa, unimpressed by Jung-hye's pretentious airs, began subtly clashing with her. Jung-hye took the opportunity to belittle Yeju, claiming her daughter had always lacked the ability to manage household affairs and wouldn't be fit for the role of a wealthy family's daughter-in-law. Yeju, feeling nervous, fidgeted with her hands, a sight that pained Doguk deeply. He immediately stood up, boldly declaring, You have nothing to worry about. Yeju is more than capable. Jung-hye, unfazed, turned to Yeju and asked if she agreed with Doguk's statement. Expecting Yeju to be meek and obedient, she was shocked when Yeju first admitted to her lack of skills, but then swiftly turned the tables. Yeju had brought a painting as a gift, one of the counterfeit masterpieces that Jung-hye had sold as genuine. The sight of the painting left Jung-hye flustered. How had it ended up in Yeju's possession? Doguk's grandfather admired the artwork and instructed staff to hang it on the wall. Unable to maintain her composure, Jung-hye pulled Yeju aside and demanded to know how she had obtained the painting. Yeju explained that she had approached the first group's matriarch, claiming there had been an issue during the painting's circulation and offering a refund. Without hesitation, the matriarch returned the artwork to Yeju. Jung-hye found this hard to believe. The painting had been sold for 10 billion won. How could Yeju have raised the funds? Yeju calmly suggested Jung-hye call to verify. To her horror, Jung-hye discovered the refund had indeed been processed. Yeju even produced official documents bearing Jung-hye's signature. When Jung-hye tried to snatch the evidence, Yeju swiftly tucked it away, warning her that she would wear the most expensive wedding dress and have a grand ceremony at the most luxurious venue, whether Jung-hye liked it or not. Jung-hye seethed with rage, but there was nothing she could do. Watching from the shadows, the secretary smirked wickedly, observing the power shift. The marriage proposal proceeded without a hitch. Upon returning home, however, Jung-hye lashed out at the secretary, blaming him for failing to keep Yeju under control. Yura anxiously inquired about the outcome, but when she realized the marriage proposal had not been sabotaged, she stormed off to drown her sorrows with Jae-ho. Jae-ho comforted Yura, promising to speak with Yeju and persuade her to reconsider. But Yura sneered, revealing that the engagement had already been finalized. This revelation shattered Jae-ho, who had been hoping to use Yeju's connections to climb the social ladder. Yura, sensing an opportunity, manipulated Jae-ho into helping her sabotage Yeju. The next day, during a business meeting, Jae-ho openly opposed Doguk's new project proposal. He suggested the company focus on partnerships with Taiji Group instead, arguing that the project was only being pushed because Doguk wanted it. Doguk, unfazed, retorted, If I can't run my own company the way I want, then why should I be its leader? Jae-ho accused Doguk of favoritism, suggesting he was prioritizing his fiancée over the company's interests. Doguk coolly replied, You're right, I question your judgment. You couldn't even see the worth of the woman you once had. Sensing the escalating tension, the secretary quickly ushered out other employees. Doguk challenged Jae-ho to speak plainly. Jae-ho, emboldened, claimed he had dedicated 5 years of hard work to the company, while Doguk was rewarded simply for dating his former fiancée. However, his plan to drive a wedge between Doguk and Yeju backfired when Doguk openly declared, I've fallen in love with Yeju, and I will protect her with everything I have. Since Doguk was impossible to sway, Jae-ho tried a different approach. He tricked Yeju into letting him carry her luggage, claiming he wanted to send her off one last time. However, as soon as they reached Do-guk's home, he began bad-mouthing him, insisting that Do-guk didn't truly love Yi-ju and had ulterior motives for being with her. No matter how much he said, Yi-ju remained unmoved. With no other options, he played his trump card. Do-guk had once attempted to kill someone. He had allegedly pushed his own brother off a boat, leaving him permanently disabled. Because of this scandal, Do-guk had left Taizi Group and started his own business. Yi-ju was stunned by the revelation. Seizing the moment, Jae-ho grabbed her hand, declaring that no one cared for her more than he did. He pleaded for her to return to him, pulling her into an embrace. Yi-ju snapped out of it and pushed Jae-ho away, but it was too late. Yura had already captured the moment on camera. Yi-ju, shaken, called her best friend to confirm the truth. However, her friend was also uncertain about what really happened back then. Official records and a witness's testimony seemed to support the claim that Do-guk had pushed his brother. After hanging up, Yi-ju dug deeper into Seung-yoon's background, growing more anxious. Was Do-guk really that kind of person? Meanwhile, Yi-ju's grandfather secretly met with the Taizi group leader. The two had unresolved grievances from their youth. In a gesture of apology, grandfather offered him 1.6 billion won, begging him to take care of Yi-ju. She's a pitiful child. She knows nothing about that family. However, Taizi refused the money. Desperate, grandfather dropped to his knees in the middle of the restaurant, clinging to Taizi's leg, begging him not to refuse. Onlookers whispered and mocked the scene. Taizi wanted to leave, but the old man refused to let go. Later, when he returned home, Taizi complained to his daughter-in-law about Yi-ju's family. Her grandfather is as sly as a fox, and her father is full of ambition. What kind of child could she be? She asked for Yi-ju's phone number. She wanted to test her character herself. At the same time, Yi-ju's grandfather was sighing in regret, blaming herself for being unable to help her. Yi-ju comforted her, saying, "Thanks to you, the marriage proposal went smoothly." Grandfather immediately stopped her. "Don't say such things. This is my debt to you, and I must repay it." Yi-ju grew more curious. What was this so-called debt that made her grandfather so remorseful? As Yi-ju was speaking with her grandfather, she noticed a pair of feet outside the door. After reminding her grandfather to eat well, she got up and left, only to find secretary waiting outside. Confused, Yi-ju questioned why, despite monitoring her, secretary hadn't reported her meetings with her grandfather to Jong-hye. Meanwhile, Yi-ju was in a cooking class. Though they were burnt, she was still happy with her work. Her mother-in-law secretly observed her from a distance, feeling unexpectedly jealous. Why is she chatting so happily with the instructor? She muttered to herself. She should be trying to win my favor instead. After the instructor left, she couldn't hold back any longer. She walked up to Yi-ju, took one look at the brownies and said, "At least cut off the burnt parts, or at least sprinkle some sugar on top. How else can you take this home for my son?" She then scoffed. "You claim to be an artist, yet your skills are this poor?" Nearby, another woman chuckled. "Look at you fussing over your future daughter-in-law." The mother-in-law defended herself. "If you see food made this badly, how can you just ignore it?" Later, Do-guk happened to come home and saw Yi-ju hurriedly hiding something. Curious, he took it out. Brownies. He picked up a fork. He struggled to break off a piece, and when he finally did, the brownie was so hard that he nearly broke his tooth. He wanted to impress his wife, but couldn't even swallow it. To make up for it, Do-guk personally cooked ramen for Yi-ju. During dinner, Do-guk sensed that Yi-ju was trying to draw boundaries between them. Yi-ju admitted, "When we're alone, there's no need to put on an act. This is a fake marriage, after all." Do-guk asked, "What if it wasn't fake? What if I seriously wanted to marry you?" Yi-ju suddenly remembered Jae-ho's words. Without hesitation, she responded, "That's not possible." Do-guk was taken aback. "Why?" Yi-ju replied, "I don't have that much time." "How much time do you have left?" Yi-ju glanced at her watch. "A year. So let's just stick to our agreement and keep our distance." Heartbroken, Do-guk went to a bar and drank alone. Yura took the opportunity to approach him, subtly offering him a room key. However, Do-guk completely ignored her. Seeing him about to leave, Yura grabbed his arm. Do-guk coldly stated, "I don't like you." Yura, frustrated, retorted, "Well, your fiancé doesn't like you either. She only loves Jae-ho." She then pulled out a series of secret photos she had taken, hoping to make Do-guk hate Yi-ju. But when he realized Yura had taken the pictures herself, he looked down on her even more. At that moment, Do-guk finally understood. Yura wasn't obsessed with him. She just couldn't stand losing to Yi-ju. She was consumed by jealousy, unable to accept that Yi-ju, a pathetic orphan with nothing, could outshine her. His words humiliated Yura. She tried to justify herself, but in her frustration, she accidentally knocked over a glass of wine. Do-guk turned back to her one last time and warned, "I have no interest in playing these disgusting games with you." Yura couldn't accept this rejection. If I can't have you, then I'll destroy you. That night, she went home and swallowed sleeping pills. At the hospital, when she woke up, she clung to her mother and cried, "You told me I was the real one and she was the fake. So why did Doguk say I can't compare to Yeju? Why did he say I was pathetic for trying so hard to win?" In a fit of rage, she ripped out her IV and stormed out, her hatred for both Doguk and Yeju reaching its peak. Meanwhile, Seong-yoon called Yeju, asking to meet in secret and instructing her not to tell Doguk. She agreed. However, the moment he hung up, he immediately called Doguk, informing him about the meeting. Worried for Yeju's safety, Doguk rushed to the given address. As he crossed a bridge over the water, he suddenly froze, trembling. The sight triggered a painful memory. Even as he saw Yeju approaching from the other side, he couldn't bring himself to move forward. What exactly had happened back then that made him so afraid of water? Yeju anxiously supported Doguk as he trembled. Unable to hold back, Doguk confided in her. He collapsed. Seong-yoon, who had been watching from a distance, observed the entire scene. Doguk was rushed to the hospital, and Yeju urgently called for the attending physician. But when she arrived at his hospital room, she found the bed empty. Yeju searched the hospital frantically, only to be suddenly pulled back by Doguk. It turned out he wasn't in danger at all. He had simply left to find her. Still worried, Yeju insisted he get checked, but Doguk reassured her, "It's an old problem." The next day, Doguk made a request. "Promise me, no matter what, ignore Seong-yoon." However, Seong-yoon called Yeju again, trying to arrange another meeting. Yeju refused outright, but Seong-yoon then tried to stir trouble. He claimed that Doguk had warned him to never bring up anything about their past, especially the complications between them as half-brothers, including the incident that had caused Doguk's deep psychological trauma. Hearing this, Yeju fell silent. The Doguk family began preparing for the wedding. When Seong-yoon heard about it, he immediately panicked. He tried to convince Doguk to slow down, warning that people might misunderstand. Doguk, however, reprimanded him for being rude. Realizing he couldn't stop Doguk, Yura, still bitter, mocked Yeju when she saw him taking the wedding invitations home. Han, her father, scolded Yura for her lack of manners and instructed Jong-hye to arrange a blind date for her. Furious, Yura threw the invitation back at Yeju, saying she wouldn't attend. Later, Jong-hye confronted Han, accusing him of humiliating Yura in public. She also pushed him to give Yura control of the gallery, but Han refused. He wanted Yeju to take over instead. After all, as the future daughter-in-law of the Taizhi group, it was only fitting. Jong-hye had no choice but to compromise. However, she became concerned when she noticed Han taking medication. She offered to find him a better one, but he dismissed her. It seemed clear now. This manipulative woman had already tampered with his medicine. Meanwhile, due to a mix-up, the bridal boutique mistakenly called Jae-ho, asking him to come in for a suit fitting. When Jae-ho arrived, he realized there had been a mistake and was about to leave, until he saw Yeju in a wedding dress. He assumed Yeju had deliberately chosen the same boutique just to humiliate him. When she tried to explain, he cut her off. "If you want to embarrass me, then there's no need for me to feel guilty anymore. You don't look happy at all. Standing there, you look like you're being sold off. Seeing you like this, I don't even need to curse you. You're already suffering." Doguk immediately stepped in, reprimanding Jae-ho for his cruel words. Jae-ho, however, smirked. "This is me giving my blessing." Meanwhile, Yura, determined to sabotage her blind date, deliberately addressed the woman across from her as Auntie. In front of the woman, she exposed her son Zaye's secret, how he had been secretly involved with both the daughter of the chairman and her boyfriend. Zaye panicked and tried to silence Yura, but his mother pressed for details. Smirking, Yura taunted Zaye. "Should I tell her before her imagination goes too far?" Enraged, Zaye raised a hand to strike Yura, but just then, Seong-yoon appeared, intervening. With one swing of his cane, he knocked Zaye to the ground. Zaye tried to fight back, but under Seong-yoon's pressure, he and his mother had no choice but to leave in embarrassment. Before leaving, they warned Jong-hye that they would never buy anything from her again. Jong-hye rushed after them in a panic. Afterward, Yura thanked Seong-yoon, but suddenly had an idea. She decided to stay and see who he was meeting. The person Seong-yoon had arranged to meet was none other than Yeju. His goal? To drive a wedge between Yeju and Doguk and stop the wedding. At first, Seong-yoon played the sympathy card, claiming that he and Yeju were alike, both alone in the world. "My parents divorced when I was very young," he said. "Then my stepmother entered the picture and had Doguk and Dona. In that family, I was the only one not born to the same mother. I only ever had half a place there." But Yeju remained unmoved. Instead, she told Seong-yoon to enter politics. Seong-yoon insisted, "You must be curious about what happened between me and Doguk." Just as he was about to bring up his leg injury, Yeju cut him off. I don't believe Doguk would do such a thing. Realizing Yiju was about to leave, Seong-yoon quickly changed tactics. At that moment, Doguk arrived, immediately demanding that Seong-yoon leave Yiju alone. It turned out that Seong-yoon had also summoned Doguk. His plan all along was to make them turn against each other. Seeing how protective Doguk was of Yiju, Seong-yoon sneered, "Why are you so defensive? Are you afraid of something being exposed?" Doguk warned him to shut up. Seong-yoon smirked. "What if I don't? Are you going to push me down again like you did back then? If you want to silence me, you'd better kill me this time. Otherwise, my mouth might say something even worse." This completely enraged Doguk. He shoved Seong-yoon to the ground. Yura witnessed everything. In that moment, she made a shocking decision. She would marry Seong-yoon. Jong-hye was stunned. "That's Doguk's brother," Yura smirked. "But Seong-yoon is Taiji Group's official heir. He has more power and status than Doguk. He fits my standards perfectly." Later, Doguk confronted Yiju, angry that she had disobeyed him by meeting Seong-yoon. Yiju defended herself, saying she only wanted to help. "I don't need your help," Doguk snapped. "I'm fine," Yiju countered. "But you sometimes struggle to breathe. How do you plan to solve that?" Hearing this, Doguk suddenly grabbed Yiju's wrist. "Do you really want to know everything? If I tell you, we won't just be business associates anymore. Our relationship will go deeper. We'll become true partners." Yiju panicked, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I'm only worried that you'll be in danger again." Doguk's frustration grew. "You're running away from your feelings again." With a bitter smile, he let go of her hand. "If you can't handle it, then stop provoking me." Meanwhile, Secretary secretly told Yiju that Jong-hye was investigating her grandfather. Determined to uncover the truth, Yiju asked the Taiji chairman to take her to a shaman. She wanted to know, why had her grandfather adopted her? And why was he suddenly treating her so well? The shaman revealed the dark truth. Years ago, her grandfather had driven a pregnant woman to suicide while collecting high-interest loans. To ward off the resulting misfortune, he followed the shaman's advice. He adopted an orphaned girl, believing that raising her would bring his luck back. The reason Yiju's grandfather was suddenly treating her so well was out of fear. He believed that the spirits of the dead would drag him to hell. Taiji was distressed by Yiju's tragic past. The more Taiji thought about it, the angrier she became. Yiju's family had gone too far. To make up for Yiju's suffering, she told her to call her grandmother. Yiju, having never felt such warmth before, teared up as she softly called him grandmother for the first time. Meanwhile, Doguk realized it was getting late, and Yiju hadn't returned home. Concerned, he called her. Yiju sincerely apologized, deciding she would no longer run from her feelings. She told Doguk she was going to meet someone, her grandfather. When she met him, she assured him that he didn't need to feel guilty about adopting her. Her grandfather, after receiving her wedding invitation, said he had a gift for her. When Yiju saw it, she was completely stunned. It was a photo of her and her mother. Just as Yiju was in shock, Jong-hye knocked on the door. Panicked, her grandfather quickly hid Yiju in a wardrobe, but in her haste, the photo slipped onto the floor. Jong-hye suspected that the reason her grandfather had bribed Taiji was to gain favor with the Taiji group. He urged the old man to put his bets on Seong-yoon instead. As she spoke, her gaze fell on the wardrobe. Sensing danger, Yiju's grandfather quickly blocked her path and agreed with Jong-hye's suggestion. Jong-hye took the opportunity to pressure him into transferring shares to Yura. Having no choice but to keep the peace, the grandfather reluctantly agreed. Jong-hye then warned him to keep his mouth shut around Yiju before casually revealing the truth. Yiju was actually the real heiress of the Han family. But Jong-hye smirked. "Don't make such a fuss. If anyone else hears about this, we'll just have to silence them too. That would be so troublesome, wouldn't it?" That night, Doguk grew impatient waiting for Yiju to come home. Wandering into her room, he absent-mindedly flipped through her sketchbook until he reached the final drawing. His face instantly darkened. It was an image of the moment Yiju had been in a car accident. Seeing Doguk's reaction, it was clear. He recognized the man in the car. Just then, the police called, informing him that Yiju was at the station and needed to be picked up. Rushing to the police station, Doguk's heart ached at the sight of Yiju, battered and bruised. He had no idea what she had gone through to end up in such a state. Back at home, he carefully treated her wounds, gently tucking her into bed and softly patting her shoulder to comfort her. Yiju said nothing, but silent tears streamed down her face. Soon, the day of Yiju and Doguk's wedding arrived, but Jong-hye was determined to sabotage it. She intentionally caused Seong-yoon to faint, preventing him from attending the ceremony. Then, she approached Yiju just to taunt her. "No matter how much you dress up, you can't change your background. But congratulations on your marriage. Let's see if you can actually be happy." Jong-hye's words filled Yiju with rage. Unable to hold back any longer, she grabbed a vase ready to smash it over her head. But at the last second, Doguk stopped her. This was the marriage Yiju had fought so hard for. He wouldn't let her ruin everything now. Yet Yiju had already lost control. Overwhelmed, she broke down in despair. Doguk, desperate to help, asked her, "What do you want to be happy?" Yiju wiped her tears and replied with cold determination, "I want to destroy them." Doguk's gaze darkened, but he simply said, "The moment I put this wedding ring on you, I had already agreed." Encouraged by his support, Yiju pulled herself together. Hand in hand, the two stepped into the wedding hall. Among the guests, emotions ran high. Some genuinely wished them well, while others seethed with resentment. Zhonghye had expected to watch Yiju embarrass herself, but to her shock, Yiju already knew that she had deliberately prevented her father from coming. As she took in Zhonghye's furious expression, Yiju silently vowed she would destroy Zhonghye. Then, when it was time to take the family wedding photos, Yura made a dramatic entrance in a stunning gown. She squeezed in beside Yiju and shamelessly took selfies, posting them online. As expected, her friends flooded the comments, praising her beauty, deliberately reading the comments aloud, clearly trying to provoke Yiju, while Yiju confidently declared that she would spend the rest of her life with her true love. Doguk played along and teasingly reminded Yura, "Little sister-in-law, you should hurry up and find someone good too." Thanks for watching. Please like and a drop heart. For continuation,